So I had some personal experiences when I was a student that showed me that when I was a medical student with a view to become a psychiatrist, it showed me that the psyche and what went on in consciousness was a lot more interesting than what was being taught to me. And I spent a year in India in 2 separate visits before I did my psychiatry training, and got very interested in the intensity of naturally occurring expanded states in relation to the holy places and the wonders of the East and the archetypes that were so rich there. And then I came back and did my psychiatry training, and things became very conventional in my 30s, as I so often happens. And then I came across the work of Stanislav Grof when I was in my late 30s, early 40s, at a time when I was supposed to know everything according to conventional, psychological paradigms. And I started working with Grof, did holotropic breath work, and opened up this vast new territory, and that really sort of started to fill in what I realised I didn't know. And then, of course, I started becoming more aware of Grof's pioneering work with LSD psychotherapy that had been kind of airbrushed out of history in my psychiatric training, and the depth of his thought and his writing and the way he'd really started to uncover the deeper parts of the psyche that other parts of theories hadn't gone anywhere near, really. So I thought Grof took the deep interrogation of the psyche even further than Jung had, and and Grof's very well known for uncovering the perinatal part of the psyche, but also the archetypal part of the psyche, the transpersonal part of the psyche, the way he really weaves things together. So I thought that was very interesting. And one of the things about his LSD work was the way that as you go into it with repeated sessions in a well-held space, so with a therapist, with preparation, integration, you just go deeper and deeper, and there's a natural unfolding of psychic contents. And he did very extensive research in the 50s and 60s, and with a lot of his patients in Prague over a few years, with many LSD sessions up to 100, and so that's what got me going again.
Well, I think it's similar. I think it's hard to have. I think we both kind of were drawn from early on into doing work, figuring things out, figuring life out, and I think, like a lot of people that are drawn into these professions, you're getting called sometimes because of early wounding or work you need to do, and there isn't really a choice on some level. Spaces open up, and that's your path. And I think my path was wanting to be a psychotherapist from a young age, and that was a very, very clear calling. And when I arrived in the UK, having some experiences in expanded states, and the two really worked very well with each other. So there was I think a thirst for being close to the unconscious, a sense that this is the space where probably I need to get to know really well and understand really well. So the two paths kind of unfolded alongside each other, and I can't imagine doing them separately. I think they really inform each other in very deep, meaningful ways. So I was on my training. I had these experiences that were quite profound. They were deepening my work as a therapist. My work as a therapist was deepening some of these experiences. And then the field of psychedelic work started becoming a thing. And it was a great way to integrate two parts that were quite split until that time. There was a sense that they were working alongside each other, but it was very hard to bring them into one space and do something with it. So I think the field, again, for a lot of us, provided a space where we could integrate something of these different strands of life and bring them into something useful. And that's the end result of integration. You bring something together, and then the question is, okay, what is the offering here for the wider whole, for the collective? And then there was again a sense that the work had its own trajectory, its own deepening. So, one thing kind of brings the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. I think all of it isn't interested in psychedelic work, but I think ultimately all of it is our work. And every new stage helps us deepen and find new ways to do our work. They're not that separate.
And I guess the question is always, how do you get at what really needs to be got at in order to effect transformative change? Because it's difficult, and we talk so much about, transformation and change and healing, and some of the superficial layers of that are maybe not that difficult to do within the conventional frameworks. But then how do you get at the really deep layers, the formative layers? How do you really fundamentally alter somebody's relationship with themselves, the cosmos? And these are the questions that we're interested in.
And I think what we find is that it just gets progressively more difficult, the work. There's like you say, the superficial layers, the kind of levels of change that happen and are immediate and easy to get to and access, and then the work gets a little bit more difficult. Well, we do a few things, but I think the thing that we are most passionate about is the Institute of Psychedelic Therapy and the work that we develop there. We've had, I think both of us, a trajectory of writing, putting ideas together, finding a way to anchor how we understand the world into words, and bringing some of these thoughts forward, and then it went into going into spaces where we supported parts of the field in their development. We both worked in supervisory capacity, in mentoring capacity in various spaces, but the Institute emerged, and it felt like it's the place where we can mature a little bit more in what we're doing and offer something to a wider community. That felt really important. So in there we have two roles, and it's hard to always pay attention to both roles. Sometimes our attention goes more towards one part of that layer. One of the layers is supporting a community of allied professionals to come together, hold conversations, see how they can organically create spaces of thought around this work, how they can collaborate to develop community with a good ethos, with a good depth, relational understanding of this work. And then the other side is the training that we have developed, where we get to work with a small group of people over 2 years and really go deeper into the experiential layers of this work. What does it mean to change? What does it mean to work in depth? What does it mean to include in that work expanded states? What does that look like?
So within the training, we try to build the most secure container, so the people in the training feel really as safe as they can be with the group, with us, with our therapists. So they feel safe enough to go to potentially some really unsafe places within their psyche. And then we work in a number of ways with them over those 2 year periods, using group work, constellations work. We have online sessions, we have in-person sessions, we have 4 retreats. The first 2 using holotropic breathwork, which is a really nice kind of entry point to expanded states, and then 2 retreats working with psilocybin in legal framework in in benevolence. And we think this does two things. First of all, it allows people to really go to the deep, sometimes dark, sometimes really joyous places in themselves, to become wholer, to have a think about what needs transforming, often people develop new relationships, not only with themselves, but with a kind of a bigger picture, a more transpersonal level transformation. And it's a slow unfolding. So we call our approach depth relational process. So, you go to the depth, which we think otherwise would be difficult to get at. It's deeply, deeply relational. You can only do it with people that you know really well. And it's a process that unfolds over time. And it also gives people the opportunity to watch the transformative process and what it's like to work with expanded states with their peer group, who are people that they get to know really well. So it's a training looking inside yourself, but also a more horizontal training, learning about what it's like to hold space for your peers and to work integratively with your peers.
And I think, just to add to that mosaic, we really enjoy working with people that work with people. So we have a sense that work, that we're really passionate about working with people that offer a lot to a lot of others. So there's a sense of rippling into the way people work with others, not necessarily with psychedelics in the therapeutic practice as well, that sense of deepening. We also feel that sometimes when you work in these professions, it's very hard to get space for yourself. We're so good at giving to others, it's really hard to take for ourselves. So it feels like an important space. And the other thing is the power of the group. That kind of contagion that happens when people bravely step into the process and they give permission to 20 others in the room, or 24 with us too, in this process, to step into the journey and the process. And we don't see ourselves as separate from the process. We think for that to work, we have to go into the process ourselves just as much. So it's demanding, but it's also, I think, really rewarding seeing what happens in that space.
When we started the training 4 years ago, I think we initially thought of it more as a training for psychedelic therapists, people who want to work with psychedelics, and we still do to some extent, but I think we see it more now as a training of the deep psyche. So for therapists, who may want to work with psychedelics, who may want to work with other expanded states, but maybe they won't. Maybe it'll just deepen their practice in their existing therapy. I think one of the things that really excites us is the way we see people getting deeper into their own processes. They report they're getting deeper into their therapeutic work. Their therapeutic work is really changing. And so that ripple effect, the cascade effect, is something that excites us all, I think.